Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive on the good news. We're going to be looking at excerpts from a Christian study guide
Okay.
called God's Love, the Good News of Salvation Through Christ,
Right.
and also a separate note that's just titled The Good News.
Interesting.
It's amazing how much this short phrase,
Yeah,
packs into it.
absolutely. It's not just a theological concept.
Right.
We're talking about a real lived experience for people. So we're going to look at what the good news actually means.
Okay.
Practically, what's the problem it's trying to address?
Yeah.
How does God respond to that problem?
Right.
And then, of course, the really incredible events
Hmm.
of Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection.
So let's jump right in.
Okay.
The study guide starts by pointing us to Genesis 6.5-6,
Mm.
where it talks about God's just deep sorrow
Yeah.
over humanity's sinfulness.
This is really setting the stage for the whole story.
Right.
The good news is a response to a problem. It's like a doctor offering a cure, but first you got to understand the disease. And this idea of sin, of separation from God, this is really the heart of the issue.
Then we come to John 3.16-18, probably one of the most,
Oh, yeah.
well-known verses
Absolutely.
in the Bible. For God so loved the world
Mm-hmm.
that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life.
Powerful stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a simple statement, yet so profound.
It really is.
What stands out to you about that verse?
I think what strikes me is the sheer magnitude of God's love.
Yeah.
This isn't just, some kind of vague feeling of affection. It's a love that's willing to go to any lengths to make the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
Offering his only son.
Right.
That's something that's echoed, across cultures and even other belief systems, this idea of sacrifice
Right.
being necessary for some kind of reconciliation or atonement.
Yeah, it really makes you think, what was that have been like for God
It's hard to even imagine.
to make that decision,
Yeah,
to send his Son knowing the suffering he would face?
knowing what was coming.
And the study guide, doesn't shy away from those details.
No, it doesn't.
It jumps right into Isaiah 53.5-6,
Yeah.
which uses really powerful language to describe Jesus' suffering.
Very vivid.
Pierced, crushed, punished.
Yeah.
It's intense.
It is, and it's important that we don't try to sanitize those details.
Yeah.
The good news isn't about a nice, neat little sacrifice. It's about a brutal reality. And the study guide really wants us to confront that, to grapple with that reality.
Yeah.
To really understand the weight of what Jesus went through for us.
And then it really goes into those events leading up to the crucifixion.
Yeah, it does.
We see Jesus' agony in the garden in Gethsemane.
Yeah.
The note even mentions the olive press in this context.
Oh, yes. That's a powerful image,
It's almost like too much to bear.
It's really heavy stuff.
Yeah.
The olive press was this ancient machine they used to extract oil from olives, and it required just immense pressure.
Yeah.
You crush at the olives to get that precious oil out.
Right.
And so the study guide is using this as a metaphor for the weight of sin that Jesus had to bear. This crushing pressure,
Okay.
not just physically, but emotionally as well.
And then Judas's betrayal.
Right.
The disciples abandoning Jesus. The brutal flogging.
Yeah.
The crown of thorns.
Just awful.
It's so hard to hear about.
It's tough.
It makes you wonder, how some people might find those details.
Oh, yeah.
Disturbing or
For sure.
or even too violent.
It's certainly not easy to contemplate.
Yeah.
But I think it's really essential to understanding the depth of his sacrifice. We can't really grasp the good news if we try to ignore that reality.
Right.
And crucifixion itself was just a horrifically painful and drawn-out form of execution.
The guide even mentions the possibility of Jesus experiencing matadrosis in the garden.
Oh, wow.
That's sweating blood.
Yes,
Right.
that's right. It's a rare medical condition, but it can happen under extreme stress and under duress.
Yeah.
And while we can't definitively say that Jesus experienced this,
Right.
given the immense pressure he was under, both physical and emotional, it's certainly within the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
The human body can react in strange ways under that kind of stress.
And then we get to Isaiah 52.14, which describes Jesus as being marred beyond human likeness.
That's a powerful image.
It's a really strong image.
Yeah.
It drives home the extent of his suffering.
Absolutely. And this verse forces us to confront, a truth that's difficult but important, that Jesus didn't just suffer emotionally or spiritually,
Right.
but physically as well.
Mm.
And that's really hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
But it's the suffering, according to Christian belief,
Right.
that makes the good news possible.
It's almost like his suffering becomes a bridge,
That's a good way to put it.
connecting humanity back to God.
A bridge across a huge chasm.
And then the study guide takes us to what is maybe one of the most agonizing moments. Jesus on the cross, crying out in anguish, quoting Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
It's heartbreaking.
It's just heartbreaking.
To think about what he must have been going through at that moment
Yeah, to experience that level of abandonment.
really makes you question things.
It really does.
You have Jesus, who is both fully God and fully man, experiencing the depths of human suffering, even death, for the very first time.
Wow.
It's really hard to wrap your mind around.
It's such a challenge to consider the depth of his sacrifice and what it means for us.
And what it means for us now.
But, the story doesn't end with his death.
Thank goodness.
Right.
Yeah.
The study guide goes on to describe some dramatic events surrounding his death.
Yeah.
Darkness, an earthquake,
It's like the world itself was reacting.
the dead rising, the curtain in the temple being torn in two.
Now, that's a powerful symbol.
Wow.
In Jewish tradition, that curtain separated the Holy of Holies,
Okay.
the most sacred part of the temple,
Right.
from the rest of the sanctuary. Only the high priest could enter, and even then, only once a year.
Wow.
But when that curtain tore in two, it signified open access to God for all people.
So like a barrier being broken down.
Exactly.
Making a way for people to have a direct relationship with God.
A direct connection.
That's amazing.
And it's a visual representation of the new covenant that Jesus established through his death and resurrection.
Right.
This covenant of grace and forgiveness.
And that brings us to 1 Peter 2.21-24, which connects Jesus' suffering to the concept of redemption. It says, by his wounds we are healed.
Now that is a powerful image.
His suffering isn't just some tragic event.
No.
It has a purpose, a power to transform.
It's meant to heal us.
Almost like a balm.
A soothing balm for our souls.
And speaking of, a kind of hope,
Yeah.
that brings us to the resurrection.
Ah, yes, the resurrection.
That's where we'll pick up next.
And that's a whole other story.
It's a big one.
The resurrection is like the cornerstone of the Christian faith. We'll explore what it means, why it matters, and how it ultimately shapes this whole idea of the good news.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into the good news. We left off on the edge of a pretty amazing event, the resurrection.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
The study guide picks up the story in Matthew 28.1-10, and it paints this vivid picture of an angel, an empty tomb, and the disciples feeling this just wild mix of fear and joy.
It's a moment that really captures the imagination, isn't it? The resurrection is so central to Christian theology. It's not just a happy ending tacked onto a tragic story. It's the ultimate victory over death and sin, and it's the foundation for the promise of eternal life for those who believe.
The study guide asks a couple of thought-provoking questions here. It asks us to imagine what it must have been like to be one of Jesus' followers, to witness his death and then to see him alive again. It also asks what the significance of the empty tomb is. What do you make of those questions?
Well, those are questions that have resonated with people for centuries. Imagine the emotional roller coaster the disciples must have experienced.
I know.
The utter despair of the crucifixion, followed by the overwhelming awe and wonder of the resurrection.
Right.
It's almost impossible to grasp. And the empty tomb, well, it serves as this tangible piece of evidence, proof that death couldn't hold Jesus captive.
Wow.
It becomes a symbol of hope and new beginners, a promise that even in the face of death, life can triumph.
And that brings us to Romans 6.1-7, where it talks about being dead to sin but alive to God in Christ Jesus. It's almost like this whole new way of living opens up because of the resurrection.
That's exactly it. The resurrection isn't just about what happened to Jesus. It's about what it means for us here and now.
Right.
It's an invitation to leave behind old patterns of behavior and embrace a new life.
Okay.
A life defined by faith and a relationship with God.
It's like a reset button, isn't it?
Okay.
A chance to start fresh. The study guide also highlights Romans 5.6-10. This passage talks about justification and salvation, and I'm struck by how it emphasizes that Jesus died for us while we were still sinners.
That phrase is so powerful. It cuts right to the heart of God's unconditional love.
Yeah.
It's not about earning his favor or cleaning up our act. First, he loved us, flaws and all, and offered salvation as a free gift, a pure act of grace.
That really resonates with me. It's such a relief to know that we don't have to be perfect to be loved and accepted. Now, the note titled The Good News dives a bit deeper into John 3.16.
Okay.
It reminds us that this verse is given in the context of sin. Sin being the problem that this message aims to solve.
Right.
It says that men loved darkness instead of light, and God, in his love, set Jesus to win back their hearts.
It's a beautiful reminder that God's love is active and intentional. He didn't just stand back and observe.
Hmm.
He stepped into our mess, into the darkness, and offered a solution, a way back to the light.
It's like a rescue mission, isn't it?
It is in many ways.
The note also talks about the importance of not trying to evoke a specific emotion when sharing this message. Instead, it encourages us to focus on the facts, the reality of Jesus' suffering, and the victory of the empty tomb.
I think that's a really valuable point. The story speaks for itself.
Yep.
The facts are powerful enough on their own. Our role is to present them clearly and respectfully,
Right.
allowing each person to process them in their own way.
It's about trusting the power of the message, right?
Exactly.
Now, it also mentions the possibility of Jesus experiencing hematidrosis, but it's careful not to state it as absolute fact. It seems like it's encouraging a balanced approach, acknowledging what we can know for sure, and leaving space for interpretation where appropriate.
Absolutely. It's important to be honest about the limits of our knowledge. Faith isn't about blind acceptance. It's about engaging with these stories, asking questions, and finding meaning in them, even in the midst of uncertainty.
It's about wrestling with the complexities, isn't it?
It is. It's not always easy or straightforward.
Now, the note also delves into the significance of Gethsemane, the place where Jesus prayed before his arrest.
Right.
It explains that the word Gethsemane means olive press, and uses that as a metaphor for the weight of sin that Jesus carried. That's such a striking image.
It is, isn't it? The olive press was this massive contraption used to extract oil from olives.
Yeah.
But it required immense pressure. The olives were literally crushed to release the precious oil within.
Wow.
Just like the olives were crushed under the weight of the press, Jesus was crushed under the weight of our sin.
And the note goes on to describe the 3 stages of the olive pressing process, connecting them to Jesus' 3 prayers in the garden.
Yeah, it's a fascinating parallel. The first pressing produced the finest oil with lighter pressure. The second pressing used more weight to extract more oil. And the third pressing left the olives under intense pressure for days to get every last drop.
Okay.
Similarly, Jesus faced increasing pressure as he grappled with the reality of what was to come.
It's amazing how much symbolism and depth there is to even the smallest details in this story.
It reminds us that these aren't just stories from a distant past.
Right.
They're filled with timeless truths that can speak to us on a personal level today.
That's powerful, and that brings us back to the question of what this all means for us.
Exactly. How do we live in light of this good news?
Right. The study guide ends with some challenging questions.
Okay.
It asks, given the problem of sin, why is all of this good news? What response to the cross of Christ would honor all that he has done? Those are big questions, aren't they?
They are, and they invite us to move beyond simply understanding the good news intellectually. They challenge us to examine our own lives and consider how we will respond to this incredible act of love and sacrifice.
It's a call to action, isn't it?
It is. It's a call to live out our faith in tangible ways.
To make it real, the study guide also suggests surrendering to Christ. So if Jesus' suffering was the price for humanity's redemption, how should that understanding shape our lives and actions?
That's something for all of us to ponder.
It's a question that goes beyond simply agreeing with a set of beliefs.
Right.
It's about allowing the good news to transform us from the inside out, to impact our relationships, our choices, and our very way of being in the world.
It's about letting it change us for the better and allowing that change to ripple outwards.
Welcome back to our final deep dive into the good news. We've covered a lot of ground, from the problem of sin to the sacrifice of Jesus and his miraculous resurrection.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has, and as we wrap up, I think it's important to circle back to that central question. What does this good news actually mean for us today? How do we take these ancient stories and apply them to our modern lives?
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the theological details and miss the practical implications.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. The study guide encourages us to watch The Passion of the Christ, which is known for its pretty graphic portrayal of the crucifixion.
Yes, I think visual representations like that can be incredibly powerful. They help us connect with the raw emotion and the physical reality of Jesus' suffering, which can really deepen our understanding and appreciation for his sacrifice. Sometimes words just aren't enough to convey the weight of what happened.
It's like you need to see it to really feel it.
Exactly.
The guide also mentions some further readings that delve deeper into specific aspects of the story, like Jesus' humility and the concept of atonement for sins. It's clear that there's so much more to explore here than we could ever cover in a single deep dive.
And that's the beauty of it. There's always more to learn, more to uncover, more to ponder. The good news isn't just some static doctrine. It's a living, breathing message that continues to unfold and reveal new insights over time.
It's a lifelong journey of discovery, isn't it?
It is.
The note titled The Good News reminds us that our goal shouldn't be to evoke a certain emotion in people, but rather to simply share the realities of Jesus' suffering and the victory of the empty tomb.
I think that's a wise approach. The story itself is compelling enough. We don't need to manipulate people's feelings.
Right.
Our job is to present the information clearly and respectfully, allowing each individual to process it in their own way.
It's about honoring their journey and trusting that the message will speak for itself.
Exactly.
Ultimately, it seems like the takeaway here is that the good news is about more than just believing a set of facts. It's about transformation.
Yeah.
About embracing a new way of living based on forgiveness, love, and hope.
Precisely, it's about recognizing the depth of God's love for us, accepting the gift of salvation offered through Jesus, and then allowing that understanding to shape our thoughts, our actions, and our relationships.
It's about letting it change us from the inside out.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. If Jesus' suffering was the price for humanity's redemption, how should that understanding shape our lives and actions?
It's a question worth wrestling with, a question that can guide our choices and inspire us to live lives that reflect the transformative power of the good news.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you a new appreciation for the significance of the good news and perhaps sparked a desire to explore it further on your own.